Episode 287. Anyone in this world could harm her, but he never will. Over the years, Henry had only been involved in the IT field. Although he had been developing fast with his friend, it was not impossible for him to dabble into real estate. Was he actually secretly involved in the industry? Just because of her and her company? In college, he went by the pseudonym J-Star. Could this J be him? Was that why he was choosing to help her silently instead of directly explaining to her? The more she thought about it, the more likely it felt. However, the greater the possibility, the more upset she became. For so many years, she knew better than anyone how Henry had been treating her. Even the people around her had already begun to persuade her to spend the rest of her life with Henry. There was no need to wait for a dead person to come back. Although Henry had never expressed his opinion in that way, she knew that he was willing. He was more than willing. But how could she? The better he treated her, the more upset she felt. She wanted to hide from him. Otherwise, when Jake returned, what would he think? But this Jay, in case it was really him, then she could never pay him back. Just when she was upset, there was a knock on the door. Serena got out of bed and opened the door. Keith looked a bit tired, dressed in simple casual clothes. When seeing her, he looked slightly relieved and asked, "What is the situation?" "Let's go to the living room and talk." Serena pushed him gently and closed the door behind her. Although Keith was Jake's younger brother and the uncle of her children, she knew she should avoid being together with him alone. He also understood, nodded, looked down, and found that Serena was barefooted. "Sister-in-law?" "Ah?" Serena turned her head. "Shoes." "There's no need." "If my brother sees it, he'll be heartbroken." Serena heard the words, looked down, and went straight to the living room, sobbing. "He won't see it." Keith looked at her and did not speak. In the deepest bottom of his eyes, there was the affection hidden. Not only this brother, others would be heartbroken too. It's just that she won't know, never will. Serena went to the sofa and sat down, holding the phone in her hand, slightly shuddering. Opening the locator app, she played the secret recording and handed the earphone to Keith. Her pair of wide eyes filled with helplessness and fear. Keith took it and calmly pressed her down, whispering, "Don't panic. Calm down." She nodded and sat on the side. Keith sat down on the sofa opposite her and put it in his ear. The man's wheezing and painful screaming and the woman's morbid and crazy laughter made his eyes turn cold. Serena covered her mouth and curled her legs up. Her mind was filled with the possible suffering that Jake was very likely enduring at this moment. The tall and straight figure in her memory collided with her knowledge of what an addict looked like. She couldn't imagine it. After Keith listened to all of it, 30 minutes had already passed. When she saw him taking his earphone down, Serena couldn't wait any longer. She put her hands on the coffee table and looked at him. "He is suffering. Lila is abusing him. Let's go find him and save him, shall we?" Keith looked at her and quietly asked, "What evidence is there besides this?" Serena looked at him incredulously, her voice husky. "Is this evidence not enough?" "She's calling his name. She's calling him Jake. That person is him. It is Jake Robinson." "But how do you know that the woman speaking is Lila Cox?" Keith looked at her, putting his cell phone on the table and his hands on his legs. "From beginning to end, there is no word about Lila. Spencer Cox is now irrelevant to the Cox family, who, by the way, is still wanted by the police. And she has nothing to do with the Robinson family either. Where's her motive? If you take this to report the case, if she denies it, she will act against you. What are you going to do at that time? We don't have evidence." Serena was rendered speechless. Despair swooped toward her, leaving her helpless. What should she do? Her mind became blank. "How did you start to doubt Spencer Cox?" This woman seemed to be in the clear. She looked very different from how Lila looked. Even he had no doubt about her identity. So how did Serena know? Serena told him the story of the mysterious man. Naturally, she skipped the part where she was almost molested by him. Then suddenly she remembered the words of Jay, and she took the phone and showed it to him. "Look, someone is helping us. This person has been helping us. When we sign the contract, if we seize the loopholes in the contract, we can plan other things and rescue him. Who is this? Keith took the mobile phone and looked at the conversation. The enthusiastic netizen that you spoke of before, is this Jay? Serena nodded quickly. It is this person. He has been helping me all the time. He has always been good for the company. Although I don't know him, I know that he will never harm us. How do you know? I've talked to him for 4 years. Hearing she was so determined, Keith felt that it was a bit absurd, sneered, and said without looking up, what if he had prepared the trap for 4 years to lead you into it? Impossible. Serena immediately denied this possibility. He won't. Keith's gaze paused and he looked up at her. Why? Why? Because this person was very likely to be Henry. Anyone in this world might harm her, but Henry would not. Absolutely not. Facing the uncovering eyes of Keith, she couldn't say that this was likely Henry Miller. Slowly shaking her head, she said, No reason. I trust him. Seeing the suspicion on his face, Serena added, You must know that a woman's intuition has always been very accurate. During the conversation, Keith had already looked through the entire chatting history. Serena's mobile phone had been used for a long time. So many records were kept. The more he looked at it, the more familiar he felt Jay's tone was. His eyes became deeper. He then opened Jay's account and copied the information to himself. Then he deleted the record and threw the phone back. We must first wait and see. Let me go sign the contract with CE. How can I? Serena was a little agitated and stood up, gazing at Keith. He is your brother. Now I have his news. How can you be so calm? Why do you have no reaction at all knowing he's being tortured?